Welcome, my friends, back to the fog. A world of death, pain, and fear. A world where survivors desperately try to flee from their fates as homicidal monsters stalk them from the shadows with the intent to please the entity, a mad and twisted god who watches all this with sadistic glee. The fog that surrounds you is thick with pain and fear, but there is another sensation that weighs down upon the mists. Rage. Rage hangs in the air like thick and arid fumes, suffocating the life from all who inhale it. It is the rage of a girl who did no wrong, but was betrayed by the family she loved. The rage of a bloodline passed down through centuries of torment and hatred. The rage of one who has everything taken from her, and now wants only to make others understand her torment. This is the pain of the spirit of Rin Yamaoka. Rin Yamaoka was born to the Yamaoka family. She grew up on stories about the honor and prestige of the Yamaoka family, of the meaning of her clan name. The Yamaoka is a proud and honorable bloodline, a samurai bloodline. And to honor that bloodline, her father insisted she respect it by joining the kendo club at her junior high school. She doesn't want it, though. She never really liked kendo, but she wants to do anything to please her father, because things aren't going well for him as of late. The company her father works for has been hitting hard times, and he's working longer and more demanding hours. He argues with himself. He is hard to please. He snaps at her and her mother often. He lacks patience, but demands perfection. Rin wants her father to be happy, so she will continue training in kendo. But something changes in Rin as the boys in the dojo mock her and make fun of her, laughing at her. She feels angry, and something stirs within her. A desire to put them in their place. A desire to silence their laughter. She rushes and strikes down the laughing boy that she's facing 3 times. And no one is laughing now. For the first time, Rin is not fighting because her father asked her to. She fought and enjoyed it. She liked it. No, she didn't just like it. She loved it, but it also scared her. She did not enjoy the thrill of the fight, but rather the sensation of defeating her opponent, of striking down an enemy. And this thought unnerved her. It felt like something different. At the end of the day, Rin was pursued by the boys from the dojo who she humiliated. She attempts to escape them and keep away, but it's no use. They find her in the street and begin to close in on her. The innocent and compassionate girl wants to flee, but the dragon that has stood in her seeks vengeance, seeks justice. It seeks victory. These lesser peasants will pay for talking down to a Yamaoka. The boys attacking her make her blood boil. The blood of her ancestors. The dragon that is her legacy. A Yamaoka emerges and punishes the boys. This little encounter put Rin in a good deal of trouble with not only her father, but with her school. Luckily, she was able to avoid legal trouble, as a witness said that the boys had attacked her first, but the school banned her from further kendo club activities. It was probably for the better, though. Kendo seemed to stir that dragon within her, that inner hatred. She didn't want that anymore. She had more important things to worry about. Rin wanted to become a teacher and began studying education at a private university when she got out of high school. And this made her family proud, but the fees were incredibly costly, weighing already on her poor family. Rin tried to work part-time jobs to help make ends meet and to support her family, but things only got worse when her mother fell ill. The bills kept rising, the debt kept climbing, And to top it all off, Ren's father had been let go from his job, one that he'd had and been loyal to for 22 years. Ren came home that night to the sound of screaming and crying from upstairs. There she found pieces of her mother scattered in her room, blood everywhere, her body flayed open and her limbs chopped off. As Ren took in this sight, her father appeared wielding the family katana as he brought it down on Ren. The blade dug deep into her arm. She staggered back to escape, but her father kept coming, rambling furiously about shame, about dishonor, and about death, and about legacy. Legacy. What did this old fool know of legacy? The dragon was speaking to her again, emerging again. The Yamaoka bloodline burned in her, and Ren felt that old familiar rage building. She fought back, struck at her father, but she had already received grievous wounds from him, and she could barely stand up as her father hacked her to pieces again and again, chopping through her other arm, her thigh, her leg. She was being torn to pieces. He threw her into a partition, and she fell from the top of the stairs with it, shattering the glass and covering her in broken shards of it that tore open her flesh and buried deep into her body. But she barely felt this. All she felt was anger, of fury, of rage. He would pay for this. He would pay for what he'd done to her mother, to her family. He would pay, even if it cost her everything. He would suffer. As her father closed in on her to finish his bloody work, a fog filled Ren's eyes, but it could not hide her rage, and the fog was impressed. A voice spoke to her. A new voice, not her legacy, not the dragon. It promised her revenge, promised her blood. It promised her vengeance. And Ren wanted this. She wanted it, and she would have it. Ren Yamaoka died that day, and her father died too. But Ren's soul does not rest. An Onryo now haunts the fog, a spirit who knows only rage. Alright, the Spirit is probably my favorite killer in all of Dead by Daylight. Her lore is top tier. Her design is unique and incredibly unsettling. The shifting and jerking body she has with the constantly alternating facial expressions that shift between sad, fearful, and sadistic are all set. It's just fantastic. I feel like when Behavior was doing the Spirit, they were definitely inspired by J-horror icons like The Grudge or Ringu, trying to create an Onryo. In fact, Rin Yamaoka has a few things in common with the backstory of Kayako, the Grudge Spirit. Both were Japanese women who came home to be killed by the man of their house, although with Kayako, she was killed by her husband because he suspected her of being unfaithful, and with Rin, it was because her father had snapped after losing his job. But both Kayako and Rin both became Onryo. Onryo is a Japanese yokai, a kind of yurei that is filled with rage and hatred. They are women who were wrongfully murdered, and now their spirit haunts the place of their death, or even the person who caused their death for the rest of their lives. They're usually identified by having pale and sickly skin, long, wet, or wild black hair, usually covered in blood, and always vengeful and uncompromising. The big surprise, though, is that you might not have known this, is that in folklore, most Onryo don't kill their victims right away, because that's not sufficient suffering. They like to torture their target by constantly appearing before them, making their lives worse and tormenting their sanity, forever making them wish that they were dead. Now, obviously, the Spirit isn't picky about that. She just wants blood. Now, some of you may be pointing out that we already have a killer in DBD called the Onryo, but Rin still meets the definition perfectly. If there's one thing that I actually really like here, it's how the tome addition about Rin and her Kendo Club activity adds to her already good story. The story of a girl who was the victim of her father's abuse and murder is already good enough to explain her transformation into an Onryo, but this tome reveals that Rin does have a darker and more violent nature buried within her, one that ties back to her own heritage and legacy, and it's something she's scared of, but still not willing to let go of. That inner rage and violent nature would explain very well why this girl, who seemingly had no violence in her at first, would suddenly accept the offer of the entity to get revenge. And, okay, can we just take a moment to talk about how awesome her overall look is? Her body is cut up in places with chunks of her arms just floating roughly where they should be, shards and chunks of glass jutting out of her body in odd places making disturbing noises, like fingernails on glass as she moves, like the clanking of mirror pieces, like each jerk and twist of her body is moving the glass. It's very much like how when Kayako enters a room, you always hear her signature death rattle croaking noise, caused by the fact that her windpipe was crushed during her violent death. I like the fact that the cause of her death and the things that led to it are still on display for her character. It's very consistent with her lore. It adds to a very frightening and very unnerving presence, making her just appear terrifying. It's very clever. But okay, I'll stop gushing now. Let's talk about her power. The spirit's power is Yamaoka's haunting. So here's how it works. By holding down the active ability button, you can enter the ethereal plane. The spirit leaves her body, leaving behind a physical husk that appears to be standing still to the survivors. But what's really happening is that the spirit is phase walking. While the husk stands still, you control the spirit as she moves around at a higher speed and unseen by survivors as she kind of walks through an ethereal plane. You must hold down the active ability button to keep the power going. Once you release the button, you reappear wherever you release the button at. The husk you left will vanish, and you will manifest where you currently stand. After that, the power has to recharge for 15 seconds. This power is an excellent way to throw off survivors, traverse areas quickly, or catch up to fleeing survivors, or even loop a pallet and trick a player. Since all they see is your husk, they may run to one side of the pallet and stare at your husk, waiting to see if you break it or not, when suddenly you reappear behind them and hit them. Or, actually, here's a little tip for you. If they think that you're phase shifting, you can fake it by standing still and pretending to be a husk. Then they jump over and right into you, or try to take another direction they think you're going to get away, and then they fall right into your arms. It's hilarious. It's one of the best moments that's ever happened to me with my power. Here's a clip. However, the power does have drawbacks. While phase walking, you cannot see survivors, though you can see scratch marks and pools of blood. While phase walking, the survivors are given an auditory warning of where your real body is if they listen carefully, so smart survivors will listen to see when you're moving. And finally, when you emerge from your phase shift, you're given a temporary speed boost, so you have to calculate for that when emerging. I've made the mistake of forgetting that, and I end up missing my prey because of it. Very embarrassing. The key to using this power is to anticipate your prey, figuring out where they might be heading, what their plan is, and where you might be able to cut them off. It requires some strategy, and sometimes it won't work out well. I've had lots of success and failures with the spirit, even without her perks. But since I mentioned them, let's talk about her perks, because they're pretty awesome. The Spirit's perks are Spirit Fury, Hex Haunted Ground, and Rancor. Spirit Fury is a pretty nice perk to have on hand when in the chase. After you break 2 pallets, the next time a survivor drops a pallet on your head, the entity will immediately break the pallet for you. However, you will still suffer the stun effect. That's why it may be a good idea to run this with Hubris or Enduring, or maybe even both, to help capitalize on this so that you immediately eat the stun, but then can quickly move on to a survivor and strike them down. Next is Hex Haunted Ground, and it's probably one of my favorite perks to use, mostly because I love traps. Most Hex Totems a killer uses provide a special effect to a killer or a debuff to survivors, so survivors are always tempted to cleanse them to help give them an edge. Hex Haunted Grounds plays on that and tricks survivors. In the trial, there are 2 active Hex Totems. If the survivor cleanses one of them, all survivors in the trial are instantly exposed for 60 seconds, making you able to down them in one hit. The second Hex Totem will deactivate as well once the first one is cleansed, so it can only be used once. But this totem is a great one to play just to give you that slight guaranteed edge. Nothing is funnier than being in a chase with a healthy survivor, someone cleanses that Hex Totem, and then they know, and you know, uh-oh, I'm screwed. And then finally, Rancor, a powerful perk, and some have compared it to barbecue and chili, but I personally think it's not as powerful as that. First of all, you're obsessed with one survivor, and each time a generator is completed in the trial, that obsession can see your aura for 3 seconds. At the same time, all survivor locations are revealed to you for 3 seconds as well. Once the exit gates are powered up, all generators are completed, in other words, you gain the ability to kill your obsession by your own hand, and that obsession suffers from a permanent exposed status effect till the trial ends. It's a very helpful way to assure you can get a kill in the trial, although most players will figure out that you're running Rancor quickly if they are in communication with each other, and will take steps to ensure you don't get the chance to catch the obsession easily. Survivors that work closely together and communicate can be very detrimental to any killer, not just the Spirit. But hey, look, like I said, the Spirit has to be one of my favorite killers in the game. From her design, to her lore, to her power, to her perks. She just works incredibly well. Do I think she's the most broken or powerful killer in the game? I wouldn't go that far, but I understand why some survivors get frustrated when they go up against her, because a smart Spirit, a very well trained and talented Spirit, can be devastating to go up against. They can be very hard to beat. But she's a lot of fun to play. If you haven't tried out the Spirit yourself, I highly recommend it. And in this video, you've probably seen me wearing a very interesting outfit with my Spirit, and that's because she's wearing the outfit from the dating simulator Hooked on You, which was a Dead by Daylight kind of parody game where you can date some of the killers. I couldn't resist getting it because I think it's just too funny. I would recommend at least trying that game too. But anyway, guys, that does it with the Shattered Bloodline set, where we looked at Adam Francis and the Spirit. Tune in next time where we look into a survivor who has some decent perks to help counter some of the killers playing, and the killer who he's not bad, but he's more of a meme than anything as far as I'm concerned. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time in the fog. Take care.